Okay, so secondly, the second part of the chapter here, I guess it's 18.3 in Ross, so it's technically the third, but 18.1 was just a little introduction. Second part of my handout anyway, are non-past or future sequences, and these are using what I have labeled as WCP forms. WCP forms. In genres other than historical pastime narrative, the writer or speaker may want to express a series of events that are future in time frame, such as in predictive prophetic text or instructional material. For example, if I'm doing instructional material, I'm going to tell someone, you will go to the city, and you will find a mule, and you will purchase it, and so forth, okay? So I'm sending someone to the city to go do a series of things, and I'm going to use WCP forms for this. If I were a prophet, then I might say something like, on that day, Adonai will do this, and he will do this, and Israel will do this. And that would use a series of WCP forms because I'm talking about something non-past and yet sequential, as it were. Okay? So to express this series in Hebrew, the simple perfect conjugation form is used. So the perfect conjugation form with a simple conjunction vav prefix with normal pointing. That is to say, with a vocal shava. Usually, the imperfect form is used to initiate the non-past sequence, and the series of events is continued via WCP forms, or what would be labeled as vav consecutive perfects. So basically, if you want to think of it this way, it's almost the mirror image of what we just learned, where you start a sequence in the imperfect, and as you remember, the imperfect is frequently futuristic, and then you continue the sequence of futuristic verbs with not WCIs, because those are past, but with WCPs, which will be non-past. Okay? So take a look at my example here. I have Yishma Adonai Otam, imperfect. Adonai will hear them. Adonai will hear them. That's my first clause in the sequence here. And then the second clause that continues the sequence has the perfect form zakar with a normal vav prefix to it. And I'm going to translate this not as past, and he remembered, but as future, and he will remember Barito, his covenant. V'zachar Barito. Yahweh will hear them, and he will remember his covenant. The second example does the same thing. We have an imperfect starting with future semantics and continued with a WCP form that also has future semantics. So let me read this. Yisrafu et ha'ir, they will burn the city. This is from saraf, to burn. They will burn the city, starting with an imperfect. It's clause number 1. Clause number 2, v'lakadu et ha'ir, and they will capture the people. Notice that v'lakadu has lakadu, which looks like a cow perfect third common plural, but it's got a vav in front of it. So this isn't just a simple cow perfect, it is a cal WCP form that has future semantics here, and they will capture it. If you try to translate this as a simple vav with past, if you try to translate this as a simple vav with past time, you're going to get they will burn the city and they captured the people. And that has two actions in different time frames that don't make sense going together. Okay? So this imperfect at the front of the sequence is going to usually be there, and that's going to be your clue that we are in the non-past time frame. Note that as with the WCI forms above, there are a variety of ways that grammarians label the form functioning in this way. So WCP for vav consecutive perfect, Some call it perfect plus WC, perfect plus Vav consecutive. That's Ross's terminology. V'katal, here just labeling it using the way the paradigm verb katal sounds when it's in this form, v'katal. And some call it a Vav conversive perfect. All right. So on the handout, what I've done is I've given you the forms of the WCP and the Cal. Compared that with the Cal perfect on the right. And notice that the form looks identical to the perfect in every case. Okay? What's different here, of course, is that you have a Vav. But there's no special pointing of the Vav here. The Vav is doing what Vav normally does. What does Vav normally do? Vav normally gets a vocal shava under it, or a shurik if the word begins, that you're attaching the Vav to, if that word begins with a vocal shava or a bump letter. And the bump letters are bet, mem, and pay. Well, pakad is a bump letter, right? So I would have liked to have seen the pakad, but I can't do that since pay is a bump consonant. So it becomes fakad. So, but notice that the fakad on fakad is the same as pakad. The difference being that pakad has a dagesh lene in the Cal perfect, right? Because pay is a begad kafat letter. So I'm going to see my begad kafat letters dagesh lene. When I have a vowel before it or a vocal shava, begad kafat letters lose the dagesh forte, right? Or not dagesh lene. So you won't see that. So it's not pakad, but fakad. Fakad. All right? So let me read through this, and I'll pronounce them, and we'll look at the translation value. So fakad, he will appoint. Fakada, she will appoint. Fakadta, you will appoint. Fakadt, you will appoint. Female. Fakadti, I will appoint. Fakadu, they will appoint. Fakadtem, y'all will appoint. Male or mixed group. Fakadten, y'all will appoint. Female. And Fakadnu is we will appoint. So those are your forms. Section C here, distinctive features of the WCP form, or the v'katal form. They are built off of the suffix conjugation pattern. Remember, the suffix conjugation is the perfect conjugation. There are no nutty prefixes here, right? When we're dealing with the perfect conjugation or the suffix conjugation, that only has personal endings, no prefixes, and so there are no nutty prefixes. The vav is prefixed then not to a nutty prefix, but simply to root 1 of the verb. You're only going to see the vav in front of root 1. Number 2, the vav does not have a pathak, nor does it have a dagesh forte in the following consonant. It looks like a normal, simple conjunction vav. Okay? And so here is where it is very much different from the WCI form. There is no special pointing of the vav. Note the conjunction vav is normally pointed with vocal shava. Remember, vav comes standard with vocal shava. However, when vav is prefixed before a consonant with a vocal shava under it, or prefixed to a bump letter, bet, mem, or pay, the bilabials, the v becomes u, as in the paradigm above. We've already talked about that. Number 3, here is where there can be some confusion. Sometimes the stress will move back toward the final syllable on some of the perfect consonantal personal endings, when normally the stress lies on the theme vowel, the root 2 vowel. When this happens, you can be certain that the form is a WCP form instead of a simple perfect with a normal conjunction vav. If the stress, on the other hand, doesn't move back toward the end, but stays where it normally goes in the perfect conjugation, then it is ambiguous, and you must consider the context. So take a look at these examples here. Over here on the left side, I have ufakati first, and second, I have ufakati. Now, where do you normally expect your accent to be with the first common singular personal ending from the perfect or the suffix conjugation? Well, I expect it on root 2, the kov. Pakati, right? Pakad, pakada, pakata, pakat, pakati. Usually expected on the kov. But notice here in number 2, the accent is not on the kov. It's on the T ending. Ufakati. Ufakati. That is characteristic of the WCP form. If I ever see that accent move all the way back to the consonantal ending when it normally goes on root 2, then that is a WCP form. Okay? And I'm going to parse it as a Cal WCP 1CS of Pakad, and I'm going to translate it with future semantics. I will appoint. The first one is ambiguous. Ufakati. I could translate this as and I appointed, taking it as a Cal perfect, 1CS, with a simple conjunction vav, where the conjunction vav just means and pakati is the Cal perfect 1CS, I appointed, so and I appointed. Okay? There's no future semantics to this if that's indeed what it is. It's also possible to parse this as a Cal WCP 1CS from Pakad. That is to say, it's ambiguous between the two when the accent is where I normally expect it. But if it ever moves to the back, then it's only the WCP form. Okay? So one more comment here, and I guess we'll make this point number 4, is that the translation value of the translation value of the WCP will mirror the beginning imperfect. So if I'm starting with an imperfect that is merely futuristic, then a WCP form following it will be merely futuristic. If my imperfect that starts off the sequence is, let's say it's one of those modal imperfects that has to do with saying that somebody should do something, then a WCP in sequence with it will have the same sort of nuance. So he should do this, and he should do this, and he should do this. Okay, my WCPs will not be just future, but modal. They'll have the should idea if the imperfect had that idea. So now how will you know if the perfect has that idea? That's really more contextual, because the imperfect could be merely future or modal. So you want to pay attention to that. But however you're translating the imperfect, whatever nuance it has, that's usually going to carry over to the WCP forms also. All right. A good example of that is in Deuteronomy 6, 4, and 5. So if you take a look at the page 139, he shows you that the Shema begins with the word Shema, and that is an instructional word. It's summoning the hearing on the part of Israel. Hear, O Israel. And then v'ahavta is a WCP with instructional semantics. Hear and you shall love. Okay? It's expressing the will of Adonai for Israel to love. So it's not merely future. It's not hear, O Israel, and oh, by the way, you will love as a matter of fact, right? He's saying, hear, O Israel, and you shall love. I'm giving you directions here, okay? So that WCP form on v'ahavta on page 139 is instructional. Okay, so on Ross 18.4, he introduces us to two constructions that are similar to each other. Again, they're mirrors of each other, and they both use the WCI and the WCP forms of Haya. Okay? So, Haya, as you know, well, maybe you don't know. I'm trying to remember if we've come across Haya before. Have we come across Haya? This is our first time. So we've been translating verbless clauses, clauses that are missing the copula, the verb to be, as, you know, me, Tarzan, you, Jane sort of languages, sentences. We've been having to supply the verb to be because it appears that Hebrew doesn't have one. But as a matter of fact, it does. Okay, Haya is the Hebrew verb to be. And we're going to see it used with that value in situations where we'll see the perfect used to say was, past time, in some situations. And we'll see the imperfect of Haya used for to be in the future. In the present time, Hebrew drops the verb Haya and uses a zero strategy, a zero copula strategy for doing that. So we haven't met it up to this point, but now we do. Okay, and what we're going to find in the first part of this section of Ross, so I guess I'll just call that number 1 here. We're going to see that you can use a WCI form of Haya, and it's going to look like this. It's very unusual. Okay, so here's the Hey of Haya. This is the Yod of Haya. The third letter, Hey, is missing. Okay, that's an irregularity. But what I want you to notice, and this is the important part, is that I've got the pathak right here. Okay, this vav is a vav that has the special pointing, and so this means that what it's signaling is past time. Okay, WCIs are always past, so we'll pronounce this as vayhi, vayhi. And what's going to happen in Hebrew narrative frequently is that Vayhi is going to be used to introduce a time frame. So I'll get Vayhi plus some prepositional phrase that will usually be temporal. Okay, and then I'll have Va with a doubling dot. That is to say, I'll have a WCI form. Okay? And what's going to happen here in this type of a situation is that this first clause with the WCI of Haya is just setting the past time context for us that the next clause in sequence with it is going to have. And in the Old King James, this Vayhi at the beginning was frequently translated as it came to pass, or and it was. Okay, so those are sort of the standard ways that it was translated in older Bible translations. I'm going to encourage you not to translate this initial Vayhi plus a prepositional phrase like this. I'm going to encourage you to skip over it and just translate the prepositional phrase, and then to translate the WCI as a past time, but don't translate the va on front. Okay, so let me give you example here from the book. Okay. The book we have Vayhi Vaboker. Okay, so I have Vayhi Vaboker Vayishmor. I have a WCI of Haya. I have a WCI of Shamar. And I have this prepositional phrase following the WCI. Technically, these are two clauses. Vayhi Vaboker would mean something like, and it was in the morning, Vayishmor, and he guarded or kept. Okay? And it was in the morning, and he kept. That really sounds like atrocious dialogue or English, doesn't it? Here's the way the King James probably would translate this is, and it came to pass in the morning he kept. Okay? You'll notice that the vav is not translated here. And it came to pass in the morning he kept. I would recommend that you not even say and it came to pass. You see the WCI on Vayhi? You say, what's coming is past time. This is what I consider to be a discourse marker indicating a past time setting. Don't translate it. Just say in your head, past time, in the morning, he kept. Okay? In the morning, he kept. Do not translate the vav here. In the morning, he kept. Okay? Okay, so the second form is the WCP of Haya. Okay? And so this is going to look like V'haya. V'haya. And so this is going to be non-past. Typically future. Okay? And so what this is going to do is it's going to occur in the same sort of context where I have V'haya followed by a prepositional phrase that's going to be temporal, then followed by a vav attached to a suffix conjugation verb, which is a WCP form. Okay? And these are, the V'haya is going to tell you, read this as non-past, future time. The prepositional phrase will tell you where in the future, and then that will be describing the action of the verb that comes after it in the WCP form. Okay? Okay, so notice here, in this example, I have almost the identical sentence as I had before with my Vayhi, but instead of Vayhi I have V'haya, which is WCP form of Haya, and this is future in orientation. Some would translate this as, and it will come to pass, right? It will come to pass. The old King James. We don't want to translate it that way. Just know, when you see V'haya and a temporal prepositional phrase like in the morning, it just means that in the morning is some in the morning that's not today and it's not yesterday. Okay, it's in the morning in the future. So, in the morning, and then I have a WCP form of Shamar, V'shamar. In the morning, he will keep. Okay? Don't translate the vav here either. Otherwise, it's going to sound funny. In the morning and he will keep isn't good English. Okay? In the morning, he will keep. Literally, it will come to pass in the morning and he will keep. But just translate it as in the morning, he will keep. Knowing that the in the morning is future because of the V'haya here, signaling that. So again, Vayhi and V'haya are discourse markers indicating the time frame of the clause that follows.